Welcome the chosen ones. When heaven renders a verdict, hell cannot contest it. The chosen one. Imagine this. While they laughed at your silence and mocked your stillness, heaven was preparing a public rehearsal so spectacular that it would reduce their reputation to ashes. You weren't passive. You were being positioned. Every time they whispered behind your back, a higher jurisdiction was gathering evidence. Every time they tried to paint you as the villain, heaven was writing the introduction to your defense. It's crazy how bold people get when they think no one is watching, until the facts speak louder than their excuses. Like this video if this message resonates with you, and subscribe if you are ready to fully exercise your divine authority. Tell us what you think if you know this shift has already begun in your life. Now let's get to the heart of the matter because honey, what shifted overnight wasn't just the story. It was the spiritual court itself. And while you were tending to your peace and spiritual well-being, someone woke up. Not you them. One of them, someone from their own camp, someone who sat in silence for too long watching you be crucified, scapegoated and abandoned, finally stood up and said, "Enough." And when they spoke, the entire spiritual frequency dropped a few octaves. I'm not talking about a tweet or a subtweet. I'm not talking about a cousin with a keyboard. I'm talking about someone with weight, authority, and contacts. Someone whose words don't just create a buzz. They shake the floors in rooms where you've never been invited. And this time, when they spoke, they didn't defend you softly. They flipped the script like changing tables in a courtroom mid-verdict. Overnight, the silence was broken. But not your silence, theirs. And now, they are scrambling. They are sweating. They are holding emergency meetings, not because they feel guilty, but because the very person who just exposed them is someone they need, someone they fear, someone they cannot manipulate with tears, charm, or titles. Let's be clear, your silence was never a surrender. It was surveillance. You weren't hiding, you were hidden, protected, and positioned. And now that the spiritual gag order is lifted, the divine counterattack has begun. And it didn't start with your mouth. It started with them. Someone just triggered divine justice through their words. They aren't defending you out of pity. They aren't doing it for attention. They are doing it because they see now. They see the scale of the deception. They see how long you suffered alone. And they know that if they don't speak now, the weight of that silence will eventually bury their own name. So they are making noise on purpose. And the louder they speak, the more the narrative collapses. You were once the easy target, the quiet one, the spiritual one, the one who said, "Let me pray about it." They didn't hesitate for a second to smear your name because in their eyes, you had no army, no witnesses, and no one watching over you. But oh, what a plot twist heaven loves to reserve for us, because now they are the ones being watched. Every lie they told about you is being exposed. The mask is falling, and underneath, it is chaos. Isn't it wonderful when the truth doesn't even need to raise its voice? When it enters the room, draped in glory like a robe, and the darkness begins to suffocate under the weight of its own accusations. That is what happened overnight. The doors of the spiritual court swung wide open, and the judge didn't just rule in your favor, he appointed a defender to proclaim it out loud. Now, the echoes are turning against the very ones who bet against you. Their stoic faces are starting to crack. Their group chats are imploding. Their confidence is crumbling under the weight of someone else's boldness. And you? You don't even need to justify yourself. You simply have the chance to witness live what a divine reversal looks like. This wasn't vengeance. It was heaven's announcement. The case is closed. And the chosen one rises. They had reinforcements. They had a crowd. They had echo chambers, rumor networks, and people ready to endorse their nonsense just to stay in the loop. They thought numbers equaled truth. They confused agreement with righteousness and weaponized groupthink to make you look like the problem, because they didn't expect you to survive, let alone be divinely approved. But here is what they never took into account. Your success does not rely on popularity. You were created for a specific purpose. You weren't looking for backup. You carried within you a plan straight from heaven. While they were accumulating likes, you were carrying destiny on your shoulders. While they gossiped in group chats, angels were taking notes in the courtroom of the Most High. Now the scales have tipped, and they don't even realize that the tipping point wasn't numerical, it was assigned. You see, when you are destined for something greater, you don't need a crowd to confirm it. You just need alignment. And that is what happened overnight. God's appointed time arrived. God designated someone not only to see you but to speak loudly in your favor with ferocity and strategy. They had friends, you had a prophecy. They had alliances, you had authorization. That is why the situation didn't just reverse, it flipped dramatically. Because the person defending you now isn't doing it out of pity. They aren't throwing you crumbs or offering vague support. They are coming in bold and backed up. They saw the injustice. They studied the pattern. They didn't stumble upon your name by accident, they were sent to it. And their words have weight. When they speak, things move. People listen. Rooms go silent. Now that they have chosen to take your side, the false peace surrounding your enemies is cracking like glass under pressure. They thought you were unprotected. They laughed when you were alone. They smirked when you were isolated, thinking their group was proof of your insignificance. But now they tremble because a single authentic voice invested with a divine mission is more dangerous than 1,000 voices with hidden agendas. That is what hurts them most. Your advocate is not emotional. They aren't dragging anyone into drama. They are defending the truth with clarity. They don't make assumptions, they are discerning. And they don't care who is offended because they are driven by a spiritual urgency to correct what has been corrupted. This kind of defense cannot be bought, manipulated, or silenced. Suddenly, those who had the audacity to attack you when you were alone are rushing to revise their stories. They are changing their style, softening their tone, hoping no one notices how loud they were before. But the damage is already done. And your defender is just getting started. They aren't defending you to make noise. They are defending you because heaven charged them to restore the truth. When someone speaks with the anointing, with clean hands and spiritual fire, their words become weapons against lies. You didn't need to convince them. You didn't need to scream for help. You didn't even know they were watching. But God knew. God placed them there. For a time such as this. Because when He assigns a mission, it comes with strategy, evidence, and divine revelation. Now what they built with supporters is collapsing under the weight of a single voice, the voice of God. This is no longer a popularity contest, it is a prophetic correction. And honey, this is only the beginning. You wondered sometimes if anyone would take your side, if anyone would even notice all you endured in silence. But now, your name is being spoken in places you've never set foot, by voices you never imagined. And they aren't whispering. They aren't hinting. They are proclaiming your truth in clear, incontestable terms, right in front of the very ones who once endorsed your crucifixion. This is the part they didn't foresee. You see, when they excluded you, they thought it would be final. They thought removing you from the table would erase you from the narrative. But what they didn't understand was that heaven had already planted a seed, an influential, well-connected person of integrity, right in the center of the room they were trying to bar you from. Now that this seed has sprouted, your name is being brought up in meetings you were never invited to, in conversations you were once excluded from. Not as gossip, but as a testimony, a correction, a divine realignment. The very people who mocked you are now confronted with a version of your story they absolutely did not see coming. And this time, it comes from someone they cannot ignore. That is the spiritual power of being intentionally hidden. While they were busy trying to control the narrative, heaven was appointing someone to carry yours. That person has now fully stepped into their role, not as a savior, but as a witness, a chosen witness whose voice commands respect where your enemies felt too comfortable. They aren't defending you with vague gestures. They are dropping facts, timelines, and contextual revelations so precise it makes people uncomfortable. Those who thought they buried you under a pile of lies now see their stories crumbling under the weight of credibility. And you don't even have to show up. You aren't knocking on doors anymore. You aren't trying to re-enter places that once tried to erase you. Because the door you were never allowed to walk through has now become the place where your defender sits in court. What they are doing isn't flattery. It's a prophetic confrontation. It is calling out injustice with precision. It forces people to re-examine their beliefs and why they believed them. Suddenly, the loved ones who nodded along to the lies are silent. Suddenly, those who previously rolled their eyes at your silence are listening with conviction, wondering how they got it so wrong. You don't need to chase credibility when heaven has appointed someone to speak for you. That is the full strength of this shift. God didn't just justify you, He raised the voice of someone strategically placed in high positions, and they are turning the spotlight into every corner where your name was smeared. The spiritual courtroom now rings with your truth. And this time, the echo has witnesses. Think about it carefully. You aren't just being defended, you are being publicly, boldly honored, and it is shaking the very foundations of every lie built in your absence. This is what a divine reversal looks like. Not loud, not messy, just precise, just holy, and just on time. They were bold, weren't they? They laughed like hyenas behind your back. They threw your name in the trash like it was disposable. They told lies so loudly and shamelessly because they were convinced there would be no consequences. They thought you were alone, unprotected, and defenseless. In their arrogance, they mistook the silence of heaven for your defeat. But today, those same mouths that couldn't stop talking are suddenly too afraid to speak. The laughter has died down, the sarcasm has choked in their throats, and the boldness has been replaced by body language that betrays discomfort, nervous glances, awkward silences, and a desperate attempt to clarify things they once stated without hesitation. Because someone stepped in with authority and isn't asking for explanations, they are making declarations. Let's be real, they never thought this would happen. They thought you would remain forgotten, rejected, and disbelieved. They saw you as weak, easy to isolate, and even easier to humiliate. They took full advantage of that illusion. They peddled rumors at will. They slandered without blinking. They told half-truths and twisted stories without ever expecting to be held accountable. Why? Because when you were suffering, it cost them nothing to watch. They didn't think anyone important was watching you. And now that this person is, they are terrified, not sorry terrified. They aren't reviewing their behavior because their conscience finally woke up. They are changing because a person they respect has started calling it out loud, publicly, and with precision. The fear they feel isn't holy, it's selfish. It's the horror of being seen, not by you, but by someone who can actually reveal what they did and make them admit it. You see, the same people who cheered when you were discredited are now praying not to be mentioned by name, because they know the story is being retold. And this time, it is accurate. The situation didn't just reverse, it flipped. And when it hit the ground, all the illusions they hid behind shattered. What's incredible is that your defender isn't doing anything extravagant. They are simply telling the truth. But when truth comes from the mouth of a respected person, it has a completely different impact. It cuts deeper. It short-circuits all their defense mechanisms and forces them to confront themselves in a new way. They aren't used to being challenged. They are used to leading the dance, warping perception, manipulating the narrative, and making you look like the unstable one. But now, they are the ones fumbling for words, trying to mitigate the damage, and it isn't working. Why? Because truth has its timing. And that timing hit them full force. Now they are over-justifying and backpedaling, but it's too late. The image they created of you is being dismantled in real time, and they can't stop it. They can't gaslight their way out of this. They can't silence the one defending you now. And you didn't have to strike back. You didn't have to clear the air. You kept walking, praying, and holding your silence like the sword it always was. And now, the sword has been drawn by another's hand. Your stillness was your strategy. Their arrogance was their downfall. And now, the sound of their silence is louder than any insult they ever hurled at you. They called you a liar, manipulated you with a smile, and spoke with such conviction that even those close to you began to doubt what they saw, heard, and felt. They turned your truth into fiction and presented it as established fact to anyone who would listen. You tried to defend yourself, but every word out of your mouth was dissected, diluted, and dismissed. And now, someone walks into the room with evidence you didn't even know existed, and everything has shifted. Receipts, voice notes, screenshots, eyewitness accounts, precise timelines that link your silence to their actions, proof so precise it shatters their entire facade. This is not speculation. This is not drama. It is undeniable. You see, while you were trying to move on, someone else was watching. Someone you didn't even know had access. Someone who remembered the details, recorded the patterns, and took note of the contradictions. And when heaven gave them the green light, they didn't come softly. They arrived with fire and files. They didn't just speak for you, they revealed the truth for you. And the best part is, you didn't orchestrate any of it. You didn't need to beg anyone to believe you. You didn't need to use low blows, throw jabs, or strike back. You were unaware of the extent of the evidence gathered for your defense. But God knew. God kept every moment. And now that the time has come, He is releasing the files and using their own mess as the foundation for your vindication. This is the part they didn't see coming. They never imagined that the lies they told with such confidence would one day serve as evidence against them. They didn't think the casual cruelty they inflicted would be archived, documented, and brought to light in a moment of divine revelation. But that moment has arrived, and it is loud. Those who laughed behind your back now have their eyes glued to their screens, witnessing the truth unfold before them. And they cannot deny it. They cannot discredit it. They can no longer pretend not to know because the evidence speaks for itself. And it does what your voice was never allowed to do. It dominates the room. It is no longer you under investigation, they are. And that is the beauty of it. The evidence doesn't just clear your name, it confirms your strength. It proves you weren't exaggerating. You weren't wrong. You weren't making things up. You were enduring something they never had the courage to face. And now, someone else is holding up the mirror and forcing the truth to break out. What they intended to use against you is now condemning them. The context for that out-of-context screenshot has finally arrived. That false narrative they built with half-truths and whispers. The full story is here, and it is drowning out the lies. They never imagined their own weapons would betray them. But honey, their receipts backfired. And you? You didn't lift a finger. You didn't disturb your peace. You didn't burn bridges. You made truth your strategy. And now the justice you prayed for walks into the room, wearing a badge and carrying your freedom in files they cannot deny. A single sentence was enough to shake the foundations. The problem is you, not them. And suddenly, the room froze. Not because it hadn't been said before, but because of who said it. Someone they revered, not through prayer, but through influence. Someone whose validation they sought, whose favor they fought for, whose approval they wore like armor. And that person shattered the illusion in 7 simple words. They didn't see it coming. They built their identity on the credibility they were given, on the control of perceptions. They wore the masks so well that even you began to doubt yourself. They painted you as the chaos, the conflict, the problem. And people bought it because no one wanted to challenge the loudest voice, especially when that voice belonged to someone capable of ruining reputations with a single look. But as soon as their idol turned and revealed the truth to them, the show collapsed. The tears dried up. The stories unraveled. The fake humility vanished because that voice was their open sesame. Their untouchable ally just named what they spent years concealing. You see, some truths hit differently depending on who speaks them. You could have repeated it 100 times and they would have ignored it, calling you bitter or dramatic. But when someone they respect says it clearly, publicly, and without hesitation, suddenly they are shaken. Suddenly, the truth is not so easy to brush aside. That is why the room went silent, because authority had spoken. And it wasn't whispered behind closed doors. They announced the correction right in front of their audience. Those same people who nodded and smiled while you were ridiculed are now avoiding your gaze, scrolling through their phones, wishing they could disappear. The very ones who defended them are now re-evaluating everything they thought they knew. When the voice they trust most tells them that you are the problem, it forces them to look again, and this time without filters. And it wasn't just what was said, it was how it was said. No pretense, no backpedaling, no vague suggestions. Just absolute, hard-hitting, sacred truth. It didn't need to be loud to be devastating. It was clear. And clarity has the power to cut deeper than volume ever could. This is the power of spiritual timing. Heaven waited until their pride was at its peak, until they were comfortable, convinced the story would never change. And then bam! The very platform they used to spread their lies became the site of their unmasking. Now they are caught off guard, not because they disagree, but because they don't know how to survive outside the narrative they created. They don't know how to function without the sympathy they manipulated. They don't know how to behave in front of a room that no longer applauds them. And you didn't have to say a word. You didn't fight for this moment. You didn't beg for it. You didn't orchestrate it. Heaven planned it. Heaven chose the messenger. And heaven ensured that when the truth was finally told, it came from the very mouth they never imagined would turn against them. It's poetic. It's prophetic. It's justice in action. They stood by and did nothing while you were torn apart. They stayed silent when you needed them most, persuading themselves that staying neutral was the right thing to do. But now, they are switching sides. And it's not because they had a moral awakening or finally see the truth. It's because they are afraid. They are afraid of being dragged down with the lies they helped perpetuate. This isn't loyalty, it's self-preservation. They saw the truth starting to manifest and realized they were on the wrong side. Now they are doing everything possible to distance themselves from the very mess they once nurtured. They like your posts. They share your truth. They even offer vague, evasive apologies, hoping to protect their own reputations, not yours. Make no mistake, their sudden show of support isn't about you. It's about them trying to cover their tracks. They don't want to be associated with the disaster unfolding before their eyes. They don't want to be seen as complicit when it all falls apart. They were silent when your name was dragged through the mud, but now they are attempting damage control because they see how fast the narrative is shifting. Their silence was never neutral, it was passive complicity. And now that the tide is turning, they are jumping ship. Not because they suddenly understand your pain, but because they are terrified of what comes next. They fear the revelation looming on the horizon. They are scrambling to align with you now that the truth is undeniable. But their shift is not based on authenticity, it is rooted in fear. These same people who once dismissed your struggle now claim they were always on your side. But when they didn't speak up at the crucial moment, when they didn't risk their own status to support you, that is when they revealed their true colors. The reality is, they didn't want to be part of the mess until it was clear they had no choice. Now they hope that by joining the surge of support, they can avoid the fallout. But don't be fooled, they aren't loyal to you, they are loyal to themselves. They were never truly neutral. They were waiting for the outcome before acting. They had to see which way the wind was blowing. And now they are trying to align with whatever protects them best. But guess what? Their late-game loyalty doesn't impress you. You see them for who they are, people who only speak up when it's safe. Those who let you get crushed and now want credit for your rise. You don't need that kind of support. You don't need people who wait for confirmation before standing for the truth. They are scared now because they realize they might be next. They are becoming aware of their actions every time they stayed silent. Every time they let lies spread unchecked, the consequences are coming back to haunt them. They didn't want to be exposed when it was your turn to be stripped bare, but now they hope that by aligning with your truth, they can protect their own legacy. But here's the thing, divine justice doesn't follow their calendar. It doesn't work on their terms. It doesn't care if they have seen the light now. The truth will eventually reveal everything, and their last-minute loyalty won't change what has already been written. You don't owe them your trust. You don't owe them your access. Let them watch the truth unfold from the sidelines. Let them squirm as the consequences they thought they dodged settle upon them. Their survival instinct doesn't change the fact that they had the chance to stand by you in the hardest moments and chose silence. Now they will reap what they sowed, and you will find yourself moving forward without looking back. This was no accident. It wasn't fate. It wasn't just a matter of timing. What just shifted in your life is not a coincidence. It is divine intervention. This is the court of heaven in session. The verdict has been handed down. And you aren't just being vindicated. You are witnessing divine justice play out in real time. A courtroom drama that transcends the natural realm and reaches deep into the soul. For so long, they seemed untouchable. It seemed they could mock you in public, slander you in secret, and manipulate the narrative with impunity. They seemed to be winning because they controlled the story and the audience. You were isolated, silenced, and forgotten. But heaven was not silent. God was not absent. No, God was building a case. And now that the case is open, the truth is breaking out like a flood, impossible to contain, irresistible in its force. They thought they could keep their secrets. They thought they could bury you under a mountain of lies and silence. But what they didn't know was that heaven had already sent a divine prosecutor to gather evidence, connect the dots, and wait for the perfect moment to open the file. And now that the moment has arrived, the evidence is undeniable. The witnesses are speaking the truth, not in whispers, but with the sonic clarity of justice. The verdict has already been reached. This is not a trial about guilt or innocence, it is a trial between truth and lies. And truth doesn't just win in spiritual courts, it demolishes the lies. It dismantles the illusions. It rewrites the very narrative that tried to erase you. They might have thought themselves invincible while acting in the dark. They thought no one would notice their manipulations, their gaslighting, their strategic silences. But someone else, someone with true spiritual authority, saw it. And now they are saying it publicly, boldly, and out loud. This is much more than a defense, this is a correction. They thought they owned the narrative. They thought they could make you the villain and walk away unscathed. But that's not how divine justice works. When God enters the courtroom, the tables aren't just turned, they are flipped so violently that everything they built on lies is crumbling. This moment isn't just about you being validated, it's about everything they tried to hide being brought into the light. It's about people who once closed their eyes now being forced to see what they were too afraid to acknowledge. It's about all the masks they wore and all the stories they told being stripped away by the truth. And the best part is, you didn't have to do a thing to make it happen. You didn't have to fight for this moment. You didn't have to scream. You didn't have to force anyone out of the shadows. You just had to endure. You had to survive. And now someone else is taking the floor, someone who doesn't fear the repercussions, someone who is using their influence to dismantle everything your enemies built. Divine justice doesn't rush. It doesn't act impulsively. It waits for the right moment, the moment they think they are invincible. When they think they've gotten away with it all, right at the peak of their arrogance, heaven lifts the veil, exposes the truth, and forces them to face the consequences. You didn't need to argue. You didn't need to force them. You just had to stand still, and the truth did the rest. And that truth is echoing in every room they thought was safe. It is exposing every lie they thought was buried forever. And they cannot stop it. They cannot erase it. They cannot escape it. The verdict is in, and it is irrevocable. You never had to prove anything to them, not to those who had already decided you were the villain regardless of the truth you spoke, not to those who twisted your words and peddled half-truths, not to those who saw your suffering and decided it was easier to ignore you than face their own discomfort. You were never meant to prove yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. You were meant to show them who you were through your endurance, by your ability to stand tall when they expected you to fall, by your peace when they wanted you to react, by your consistency in the face of relentless storms. You were the evidence all along. Every time they tried to provoke a reaction and you chose silence, you chose grace. You chose to rise above their attempts to break you. In doing so, you became a living testimony to what they tried to bury. And now, someone else has seen it. Someone who was paying attention when they thought no one was watching. Someone who quietly observed the contrast between your calm and their chaos, your integrity and their manipulation. They see it now, and they see the truth loud and clear. They know exactly who you are. They perceived the strength in your stillness and the power in your restraint. They aren't defending you because they feel sorry for you. They are defending you because they recognize that your endurance is a testimony that cannot be ignored. You didn't need to shout to be heard. You didn't need violence to expose the lies. Your presence became the most eloquent testimony of all. This person is standing up for you not out of pity, but because they've seen the strength of your spirit and the truth of your story. What they are doing now isn't just clearing your name, it is exposing the lies that tried to bury you, the narratives invented to discredit you and those who thought they had the power to silence you. You had nothing to prove. You were the proof from the start. The truth you lived, the pain you carried, the strength you showed in the face of abandonment, all of it came together to form evidence they couldn't deny. You didn't need to argue your case because you already embody it. Every step you took, every trial you overcame, every moment you kept moving without retaliation, it all proves you were never defeated. And now, with the support of someone with true authority, the lies are collapsing. The silence is broken. Those who once doubted your strength must now face the reality. They were wrong about you. Completely wrong. They never realized that by underestimating you, they gave you the space to become stronger than they ever imagined. The person defending you right now isn't just standing behind you. They are attacking the very systems that tried to destroy you. This isn't polite, behind-the-scenes support. It is strategic. It is bold. It is loud. And it is dangerous, not to you, but to the enemies who thought they could bury your truth. They aren't just speaking on your behalf. They are dismantling the lies, exposing the deception, and shaking the structures that tried to oppress you. They are coming for everything your enemies built through manipulation and control. They see what you endured, and they aren't afraid to confront what others avoided. They are using their voice and influence to strike directly at the root. This person isn't driven by pity, they are driven by principle. They see the injustice for what it really is, not just an isolated drama or another quarrel, but a pattern of abuse and deceit that has gone on far too long. They are taking the fight to those who thought they were untouchable. Those who silenced you in secret must now give an account in public. They didn't come to play or to negotiate with cowards hiding in corners. They came to confront what others were too afraid to name. They aren't looking for apologies or lukewarm gestures. They are here to correct what has lasted too long. They are here to bring justice where it was denied. Your enemies never feared you, but they feared this person. And now that they are taking your side, everything your enemies took for granted is falling apart. Their networks are weakening, their alliances are fraying, and the secrets they thought were safe are out in the open. They laughed because they thought you were alone. They thought they could shut you up and manipulate the narrative without consequence. But now they are terrified because the person representing you doesn't just speak with emotion, they speak with authority. And that authority carries consequences. This is no longer a battle of words, it is spiritual warfare conducted with legal precision. They thought they could fool you with lies, but now the truth is being used as a weapon against them. Every lie they told is being exposed by the weight of evidence. The harder they try to cover their tracks, the more the truth breaks through. By isolating you, they thought they could stifle your voice. But in doing so, they didn't just underestimate you, they underestimated the heavenly strategy for your defense. This person is like a wrecking ball to the constructs of lies your enemies spent years building. They aren't afraid to name those who wronged you or reveal truths that others were too scared to admit. As they take this fight to the top, your enemies are watching their world collapse from within. The protection you thought you lacked was never absent, it was being prepared. And now that it has arrived, it is irresistible. It's not just a fence, it's a divine reckoning. They never thought it would come to this, but it has. So here is the truth, what you went through was never meant to break you. The goal was to make you something far more powerful than they ever imagined. You were never the problem, they were. And now, as silence falls in the spiritual courtroom, the verdict is clear. They haven't just lost their case, they've lost control of the narrative and the power they thought they held over you. What they tried to use to destroy you has become the instrument of your restoration. You didn't need to fight, argue, or beg. Heaven handled it for you. Every moment spent in silence, every time you chose grace over chaos, it was all building toward this divine revelation. And now, an influential person has stepped in. Someone unafraid to speak up, using their voice to reveal what others would rather keep hidden. They don't speak for applause, they speak because the truth can no longer be suppressed. You no longer need to wonder or fight for validation. You have already been validated in the eyes of heaven. And those who thought they could manipulate the story are watching their world fall apart, one truth at a time. Stand tall. This is your moment. The tide has turned, and they will never be able to put the pieces of their lies back together. Your silence was the ultimate proof. And now, the whole world sees it for what it truly is. Your vindication is here. The story isn't just being corrected, it's being rewritten.